I tell you what, breaking news here. This is on Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Jerry Hamilton. Terry Joseph, Texas safeties coach, was the cornerback coach for his first 4 years in Austin, is accepting a new position with the New Orleans Saints. Our CJ Vogel confirms the initial report earlier today from Anwar Richardson. Jerry, this is a move for Texas that we thought might be coming, but we thought it was going to come like maybe when Blake Gideon left, but perhaps the writing was on the wall given the fact that Mark Orfe was the corners coach and recruited and signed to be the corners coach, moving Joseph to safety. What does this all mean? But I guess the net of it is Steve Sarkisian back looking for another assistant coach this late in the cycle in mid to late February. What are your thoughts about Terry Joseph heading to the New Orleans Saints?
Yeah, I mean, look, there was a couple of things there. We never heard of a contract extension for Terry Joseph, who only had a 1-year extension last year through this year. We never heard of an extension for him, truly. So that was going to be interesting to see how that all played out, because we knew it probably wasn't going to be a long-term extension even if he'd stayed another year. So that was always in question. But then after Mark Orfe was hired, and we kind of heard rumblings, but when Mark Orfe was hired, and I was told that Orfe was going to coach the corners, and we reported that he was going to coach the corners. To your point, Bobby, what did that mean long-term for Texas and Terry Joseph? And I know Joseph had coached safeties before, but that kind of left the question and the book to still be read and finished on Terry Joseph in Texas. And obviously Terry Joseph he has a chance to go home. He's from Marrero, Louisiana. That he didn't go to John Ehret, was at Shaw. He went to neighboring school potentially down there. Gets to go home, be part of New Orleans Saints organization. So congrats to Terry Joseph on that. But now Sark does get to go after a safeties coach because Mark Orfe is locked in at corners. Kenodo Hudson is locked in as the nickels coach, and now he will make that safety hire. And what's interesting is when Blake Gideon left to go to Georgia Tech, a lot of the names brought up initially in that search were safety/secondary coaches, whether it be a Corey Sanders at Pittsburgh, the Mickens at Notre Dame, who Texas never made contact with. Sark was looking for a corners coach at that time. Now he's going to be looking for a safeties coach. So it's going to be a different round of names now.
Yeah, a different round of names. I think that what is surprising to some is that Sark announced the move last week of Joseph to safeties. And so everybody, including myself, falsely thought, okay, this situation may be done. But the reality of it is, Jerry, given that this is still in the NFL hiring cycle, things were still moving behind the scenes that they couldn't really report on or talk about. Kellen Moore obviously just took the Saints job, the former Dallas Cowboys offense coordinator, former Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl champ coordinator. Brennan Staley is the new defensive coordinator in New Orleans. He has some familiarity with Terry Joseph's brother, Vance, from his time in Denver. So it makes a lot of sense, but this coming to pass, it kind of throws Texas and its spring ball thought process into flux. What are your thoughts now? Does Texas need a secondary coordinator? Because that's theoretically what Terry Joseph was going to be on the back end, is more of a secondary coordinator to match with Pete Kwiatkowski and Johnny Nansen. What is that what they're looking for? Are they looking for a Mike Mickens type that actually calls the secondary like he does at Notre Dame?
Yeah, it'll be interesting, but I'll say this. I think Sark was preparing for this move, so I don't think this is going to be some longer, drawn-out process. I think this is he's been preparing, and I don't think this is going to be as long. And I could be wrong. I don't think this is going to be as long of a search as the running back coach was, because I think there was already, anytime your guy is somebody that you haven't really extended long-term, is interviewing with an NFL team, and you're moving him from the position he was originally signed to coach. I think you talked about how Sark going to retool the secondary staff. And I think Sark is well down the road on this one. So I'll be surprised if this one plays out as long as the running back coach did.
It could, but you never know with Sark, man.
Yeah.
You really don't. And I think that's part of the process here that we're trying to vet through. But breaking news, Terry Joseph now, the new defensive back coach, we believe. We don't know if he's corners, safeties, what have you for the Saints, but he is taking a job with his hometown team. This will be the third move this offseason for Steve Sarkisian, following in the footsteps of Tashard Choice taking a job with the Detroit Lions in the NFL, as well as Blake Gideon being elevated and becoming the defensive coordinator at Georgia Tech. That makes 3 for the Longhorn coaching staff off of a team that went to back-to-back college football playoffs and ended in the semifinals. Sark's coaching staff very much in demand, obviously, at this point, but it's not a complete do-over. I wonder, I got to ask you this, Jerry. Do you think that this is a sign that Texas is starting to become a place that pro teams are going to look at, since Sark has a pro background? That's where he's lost 2 of the 3, and the other was elevated to a coordinator's job.
Yeah, I definitely I can see that, because look, the reality is that if you have a bunch of NFL draft picks every year, you're one developing player, so coaches get recognized for that, your staff gets recognized for that. More NFL scouts are through your building, so they don't just see your football prospects, they visit with your members of your coaching staff about those guys. So that's almost like in a weird way and early interview process for all those guys, because they're talking to NFL personnel people, and those guys go back, and when there's a job, they say, man, I talked to this guy, we might want to look at him, right? And that's kind of what happens when you start winning. You start having a lot of talent, and these NFL guys are always coming through your door to look at your prospects. They're also not just talking to your head coach and your strength coach, they're talking to those position coaches as well. So that's what happens when you get this machine kind of going in college football. It's no different than anywhere else. When you get this machine going and you're winning, and those, you have a lot of highly ranked prospects in terms of the NFL draft, and the 14 guys at the combine bettering last year's number. If 11 and 12 guys get drafted, that betters last year's number. I mean, so that's kind of the build of what's happening right now at Texas. And I think the more NFL personnel that come through your door on an annual basis, and though y'all are developing players, whatever programs that's at, that enables your assistant coaches to get more of those looks outside of college football.
Jerry, we're being asked almost immediately, what does this have an effect in recruiting? Obviously, he's one of the guys that helped recruit Derek Williams. He played a role, at least, in Arch Manning, some other guys in Louisiana as well. What does this do in the state of Louisiana and other places with cornerback recruiting or safety recruiting as a whole, Jerry?
Yeah. So Roger G asks, well, I wonder if Blaine Bradford still OVs. That's the safety out of Baton Rouge Catholic, who looks probably an LSU lean. His brother signed with LSU in the last class, but he's been on campus 2 or 3 times. And one of those areas, obviously, that Terry Joseph had connections to, scheduled to visit June 6th to 8th. I think with all this stuff, man, I think you just got to wait to see who's hired. And look, we saw it with Xavier Crowell. No, not going to visit. Coach Choice is gone. One phone call, Chad Scott, visits back on. I mean, so I think we just have to wait and see who Sark hires and how those conversations go. But in in these situations, maybe one guy falls by the wayside, but maybe there's somebody else, another coach, if he's a college coach, has been recruiting for a while that he deems really, really good, comes into the picture. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But I don't. One thing I've said this about the running back, I'm not going to get caught up in the emotional recruit reaction in the hours, days after, because we've already seen through Xavier Crowell what happens. I'm done, not visiting Texas anymore. And then after one phone call, Chad Scott visits back on. Javian Osborne canceled a visit to Texas. He left the 13th through 15th date open. He did that because he talked to Chad Scott and Texas staff Friday night after Scott was hired and actually had a chance to get his feet on the ground. So some of those things are just going to be, it's going to be like this, a little bit of rough waters through all these processes, but it will all work out in the end. A
lot of people asking Jerry about potential replacements. Can people are saying, hey, one thing we know about Sark, it may be a name we've never heard of before. And he's right. One of the people it could be, though, is Mike Mickens, defensive back, secondary coach for Notre Dame. The interesting piece there is that Mickens, people are saying, why would Mike Mickens? To be realistic, I don't see Mickens leaving. He's the defensive back coach at Notre Dame. Roger G saying, is Mike Mickens from Notre Dame possible again? The difference is, and why Mickens might be possible, Mickens was passed over by Marcus Freeman for being the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame this offseason. Freeman instead went with Chris Ash as his defensive coordinator when Mickens might have been the successor to Al Golden, the Notre Dame defensive coordinator from this year that's now the Cincinnati Bengals defensive coordinator. So there might be something to that. We don't know if there is, though, at this point. To the greater point, look, this just happened. We're going to be checking sources and trying to figure out exactly what's going on. But I would not rule out someone like Mike Mickens, because there is a reason there he might be willing to look elsewhere from Notre Dame.
Well, the interesting thing will be, look, Mike Mickens has always coached corners.
Yep.
Corey Sanders at Pitt is a safeties coach and has gone from 2018 to 23 at Pittsburgh safeties coach and now associate head coach, safeties coach in 2024. So that's what's interesting is Sark going to hire, and we'll see, is he going to hire that safeties coach who has a history of coaching safeties here, or would a guy that's always coached corners be willing to make that move to be more of a safety / defensive backs coach and tie the whole thing together? We'll have to see. I mean, that would be a potential upgrade for a guy like Mike Mickens from just corners coach to then being a whole defensive secondary coach plus safeties coach. Or do you go with a guy potentially, and I'm not saying Corey Sanders, a guy like Corey Sanders at Pittsburgh, who's seen as one of the top guys, he's 39 years old, is one of the top up-and-coming defensive back coaches in college football. So we'll have to see which direction Sark goes on that. But I know this. Corey Sanders is very well regarded for a young coach that people don't really talk about. But we'll see where Sark goes with it.
All right. Question here from Rudio. Are you monitoring any other movement amongst the remaining coaches? Let's be clear. We had heard that, and I'll just be fully open here. We had heard that Terry Joseph's name with the Saints about 2 weeks ago, right when Kellen Moore got the job, because there's some natural affinity there. He's from New Orleans. He maybe has been looking to go into the NFL a little bit. We just didn't know what was going to happen. When Sark made the announcement on Thursday of last week, I kind of said, okay, he's moved on from the Saints. Okay. And I thought that was the case. So I don't know of any other movement amongst the major assistants. Now, I'm not saying something off field couldn't happen or a minor, but I don't know of any other coach now that has been involved. Kenny Baker had overtures. Chris Jackson had overtures. Kyle Flood had overtures, all from NFL teams. They've decided to stay, is my understanding, and signed extensions. So to that point, Rudio, I don't know of anybody else that is out there at this time. That doesn't mean it couldn't happen, but I don't know of anybody else that could be in that regard. Jerry, your thoughts on that and whether or not, I mean, you and I said, we both talked about this in the Saints with him about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago when the move first happened, but we assumed after all of this and Sark made the announcement last Thursday that things had been kind of pushed there. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, look, I think that I say this, you never know. I think Texas is pretty safe now in that regard. I mean, like you said, guys turn down, whether it's Kenny Baker or whatnot, they turn down some couple of opportunities. So I think Texas is pretty safe now, but you never know until all those jobs in the NFL are done, right? You just never know. But it would surprise me a little if there was another move.
Jay Kelly says, our secondary was so bad just 2 seasons ago, makes me nervous. The one thing I will tell you about Mark Orfe and anybody else that coaches secondary at Texas, they will be happy with what Texas has coming back on the edge because a lot of the same players were in place this year as they were 2 years ago. The difference has been the pass rush. Texas had 40 some odd sacks this year, and you could tell that how much that affected opponents and what they had to worry about with the Texas secondary. And what I mean by that is getting after the quarterback changes the outlook of a secondary every single time. So, Jay, I don't think it should make you nervous that Terry Joseph is going. This is a natural progression. I think that the one thing you have to remember is that Steve Sarkisian has been pretty good with his hires, whether it was Chris Jackson, Kenny Baker, Tashard Choice before them. He's been pretty solid. Johnny Nanson's been a solid hire and very helpful in recruiting, as well as maybe some scheme fits. So Sark's done a good job of vetting and finding coaches. And frankly, the fact that Tashard Choice and Terry Joseph are wanted by NFL teams are proof positive that Sark does a pretty good job hiring. I mean, you also have Blake Gideon that is hired that ends up being elevated as well. It's not like they're going to lesser jobs. Right. And so you got to give Sark some credit for hiring guys that ultimately other people want. And so I wouldn't be nervous about what this means for the future of Texas football.
And because we're just responding to people's questions, and this isn't saying anything. Brendan Bowersox I've ran across Torian Gray a few times over the years doing this nationally. Very, very good defensive backs coach there from South Carolina. Has a strong resume. Very strong resume. He was a safety in college and in the NFL. Obviously, a 3-time All-Big East player at Virginia Tech, and has been coaching. He's coached both safeties and corners, been a DB coach both in the NFL and at the college level for many years. 50 years old, from Lakeland, Florida. Again, that's the one thing is, will this hire be, obviously it's to be a quality coach, but will there be further ties to any other areas? Torian Gray's recruited the heck out of Florida, being from Florida. Corey Sanders from Pitt. A lot of his big recruiting wins at Pitt have been in the state of Florida. So we'll see where Sark goes with this. But we talked about this with the Chad Scott hire. Tashard Choice got Texas into Atlanta, got Texas into Orlando and that Tampa area that he had been recruiting for years. And we wondered what tie-in from a recruiting standpoint. Obviously, Sark's going to hire a really good coach. Where would the tie-in from a recruiting standpoint be with Chad Scott? Well, that tie-in was in the state of Florida. Chad Scott's from Plant City. He's recruited Florida. He's recruited Georgia, and with a little bit more interest in North Carolina for Texas moving forward. He has years of experience while at North Carolina, knowing the state of North Carolina there as well. So we'll see where it goes. There's the recruiting. But Terry Joseph was big in the state of Louisiana for Texas.
South Louisiana in particular.
Yeah, and Texas just hired Lylan Clark, though, who's a Baton Rouge guy, the edge coach. So they kind of replaced what they had lost with Bo Davis. Now they lose Terry Joseph, but they have Brandon Harris, and they have Lylan Clark. Will there be a specific recruiting tie? Something we'll watch for here with this hire. Because there wasn't running back recruiting as far as running back coach.
Yeah. So a lot of people are saying, hey, what does this do? Like, this makes Texas look a little bit like Ohio State. And I would say that living rent-free in UT is right. Staff attrition is a sign of a healthy program. This will be another opening guys will want for sure. I agree. Staff attrition is healthy. I don't know that staff attrition like Ohio State had is healthy, where you lose your offensive and defensive coordinator, your offensive line coach. Texas is officially losing 3 assistants off a staff of 10 assistants a year after losing 2, by the way, where they lost Bo Davis in what I think was a lateral move to LSU. But Jeff, look, man, I'm forgetting his last name now. Jeff Choate became the head coach at Nevada after being linebackers coach at Texas. You're going to have those kind of moves. I think that Texas is in good shape as far as this. They have both of their coordinators back for the 5th consecutive year. I think Texas is in good shape as it relates to that overall, Jerry. KD35, I am the best. Sucks having to replace a lot of coaches, but biggest thing is keeping the offensive coordinator and defense coordinator intact. And I agree with that, especially since in reality, we know Sark is the offensive coordinator. You're really worried about PK moving on and possibly Johnny Nansen and the guys that have done the work there. I will say this is a chance for Sark to remake his secondary altogether now that Mark Orfe is involved. But with Blake Gideon and Terry Joseph gone, as well as Scotty Hazelton, who coached corners this year, be interesting to see exactly what comes of it overall. So this is the news of the day. It's breaking. If you're just now joining us, Terry Joseph, a defensive back coach, was the corners coach for his first 4 years at Texas, had just recently been named safeties coach after the hiring of Mark Orfe and the departure of Blake Gideon, is apparently, according to our CJ Vogel, headed to the Saints to be the defensive backfield coach there for New Orleans. Jerry, anything you want to add before we let people go? This is the breaking news of the day that we had to make sure we did a special announcement for.
To live in rent free, to follow that, his comment. Sark could have taken calls for 2 months from running back coaches wanting to be the coach at Texas. It's going to be no different as a safeties coach at Texas. I mean, you're talking about a program that just signed the #1 recruiting class, well-equipped in NIL, in the SEC, in the state of Texas, the flagship program in the state of Texas. Sorry, Mike Elko. University of Texas, been to 2 straight playoffs, having numerous guys drafted, and a safety room that has Michael Taft, Derek Williams, Jelani McDonald, Jonah Williams, Zella Six, Jordan Johnson Rubel, Xavier Filsaime, Wardell Mack at nickel. I mean, they have recruited defensive back position extremely well. Sark could field calls for 2 months on this job, but he won't. He'll move quickly in my estimation.
Well, they need to, because spring ball happens starting around the corner. John, what do you all think of all the changes this coming off season? I got to be honest. I'll close with this. I think it's the nature of the beast. I mean, football coaching by definition is a nomadic profession. It just is. Texas has had a remarkable amount of guys not moving around, whether that's Jeff Banks, Kyle Flood, AJ Milwee. They've had a number of guys that have not moved. Pete Kwiatkowski. I will say this. This means that every defensive coach now on the Texas staff, from the original staff, other than PK, has now been gone in a different direction. What does that mean? I don't know. But the offense has remained almost entirely intact, with the exception of the running back and wide receivers coach. And I think they've got the wide receivers coach in really good hands now with Chris Jackson. They like there. Let's see how Chad Scott does and if he fits in. But what do I think of all the changes? It's par for the course. That's really what it is. All right. I think that's going to do it. Sucks having to replace a lot of coaches. We talked about that already. But keeping the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator intact is a big piece of that. All right. That's going to do it. Terry Joseph moving on to the Saints, somewhat of a surprise move. But congrats to him if that's what he wants to do. Texas now going to be in the search for a secondary/safeties coach for Steve Sarkisian and crew. For Jerry Hamilton, I'm Bobby Burton. Special thanks to Matt Hutchison, our producer, for coordinating this special edition of On Texas Football Live. You guys have a good one today. We'll have more from Jeff and CJ talking about the recruiting fallout of this later today as well. For Jerry, y'all have a good one, guys. Hook 'em.